Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news. We advise you on what you can do about it. Today, the dialogue continues on the question of what's at stake in the 2024 elections. We're going to pick up from where we left off last week with two return guests, Professor Nadia Ahmed and attorney Sharif Silmi. We want to begin today's broadcast discussion with our brother Sharif, but before we do, there's a little piece of video I'd like for us all to see. It's shocking, to say the least, in terms of the lack of political tact, I'll put it that way, exhibited by the speaker. Let's see that video, Brother Sadiq.
Let me talk about the hardest issue here in Michigan is the Middle East. And I have to be careful what I say because there's only one president at a time and none of us can get ahead of where we're going. But I think we're going to have to essentially start again on the peace process. And I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. I get that. But if you lived in one of those kibbutzim in Israel, right next to Gaza, where the people there were the most pro-friendship with Palestine, most pro-two-state solution of any of the Israeli communities, were the ones right next to Gaza. And Hamas butchered them. And so then the people who criticize it are essentially saying, yeah, but look how many people you've killed in Ritalin. So how many is enough for you to kill to punish them for the terrible things they did? That all sounds nice until you realize, what would you do if it was your family and you hadn't done anything but support a homeland for the Palestinians, and one day they come for you and slaughter the people in your village? You would say, well, you'll have to forgive me. I'm not keeping score that way. It isn't how many we've had to kill, because Hamas makes sure that they're shielded by civilians. They'll force you to kill civilians if you want to defend yourself.
Okay, without any further ado, let's bring our brother, attorney Sharif Silmi, to the platform. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Hajj Saalakhan, you did not play the most insulting and important point that this criminal fool Bill Clinton mentioned, which was that he said that those individuals, the settlers, were in Palestine before our religion even existed.
That's right. That's right.
Who is this sexual predator, criminal thug who was flying around with Epstein and preying upon girls who were trafficked from all over the world to tell us about our religion? This is what the best that the Harris administration has to offer our community. Shame on them.
Mhm.
Shame on them. We've wanted to support her as soon as she was replaced. We remember what she said in Selma, Alabama on the bridge and calling for a ceasefire. And we said, okay, maybe there's some, measure of improvement here. However, she's failed at every turn. She's running around with the Cheneys. She's a war hawk. She's expressed that she's going to do nothing but continue the same genocidal policies. And despite the goodwill, the lending an ear, the poor brothers and sisters that were sitting on the floor of the DNC just begging for an opportunity to, speak on behalf of the Palestinian people, the door was slammed in our face. So to go and cast a vote for the Harris administration after all of this is I think impossible for the Muslim community. We have to send a message and vote for Jill Stein. There's no other choice at this point.
Okay. I wanted to have you and our sister, Dr. Nadia, back on so that we could have this very difficult conversation. And I wanted to have both of you separately so that we could focus on the arguments that that each of you is making. We're all on the same page in terms of the need for some very serious change. And you're right. The worst part of that video, which I had intended to have played, it wasn't. When I saw it, the first thought that came to mind for me was that whoever's idea it was to have Bill Clinton, come on and speak, especially if they knew where he was going to be coming from. I mean, they needed to be dismissed from that campaign. I mean, for a message like that to be delivered by a former president of the United States and to be delivered in one of the most populous Arab and Muslim parts of the country, if not the most populous. I mean, subhanAllah, that was truly an insult in all caps.
It's interesting. It's the corruption of the Clintons and the criminality of the Clintons, and the media, I think overall is one of the reasons why Trump has been normalized in U.S. politics. I don't believe you would have a Trump, as somebody with his background and, despicable past, emerge, but for the Clintons. You remember the 2016 campaign against Hillary Clinton. I mean, he was able to remember that time he was on the debate stage and he said, she said, "Oh, you don't pay taxes." And he said, "Yeah, I don't pay taxes because of people like you who were taking money from the billionaires and George Soros and all these, corrupt individuals and wrote, things into the tax code that allowed me to take advantage of it." So, I mean, and that was like one of the moments. I think Dave Chappelle talked about it in his Saturday Night Live monologue. And, I think, when we really analyze the situation, a lot of, what the Clintons have done, I don't know if they're doing it on, I actually think he's being sincere here and he's just saying where he comes from. I mean, they don't see us as, human beings. Like he's justifying the slaughter of, now over 50,000 Palestinians. They say 43,000, but it's much, much more than that. At least, as 6 months ago, they said 10,000 were unidentified under the rubble. That's probably 30,000 now. So, I mean, the scale of the slaughter and the genocide, and for him to, talk about that these, folks had, nothing but goodwill towards the Palestinian people, and that, somehow, we should have been, thanking them for, the wonderful, service that the, Israeli military has done for Palestinians is ridiculous. I mean, look, I don't think that a violent confrontation at this point with, is something that anybody should be engaging in. But at the same time, I think to argue that, the Israelis have been delivering nothing but, roses and peace, messages and pigeons of, hope to Palestinians is just, baseless. It's objectively false and just really a terrible message from Bill Clinton. And I think that, it's too late at this point. I mean, we're a couple of days away from the election, but the, Harris administration has really, I think, I think she could have actually held the middle and still participated in meaningful dialogue with the Arab and Muslim populations, particularly in Michigan. I mean, we see what Trump is doing. He's there, he's present, he's meeting with folks. He's not agreeing with them. He's not telling them that I'm going to stop supporting Israel. He's just meeting with people. So I think that there could have been space for Harris to constructively engage while I think, maintaining and defending at least some of her policies. Maybe obviously we see where the American people are. The American people want to stop weapons sales to the Israelis. The American people do not want to support foreign wars. The American people are against all this, and she should definitely be against all this as well. But I think that, I mean, even just allowing the Palestinian speaker, who is a party elected official and who is going to endorse Harris on stage to speak, that's all she needed to do to get the uncommitted, vote. And I don't necessarily agree with the uncommitted on, using that as a demand. I don't think, I think we could have asked for more, but nonetheless, even that small demand was refused. So I don't think she's really given any opportunity to even allow for support, or perhaps she just doesn't want the support. So, it's really interesting to me. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, she's obviously taken a strategy to try to, court the white Republican women, and in the end, she might win the election based on support for from white Republican women. And, that might be a wise political strategy. But in terms of our community's position as it relates to, the Harris campaign and the current administration, and, who's speaking on behalf of the administration and our response to it, I think we need to go green.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to the points that Clinton made, and the background to which he made those points, it is true that the kibbutzim that ended up being directly impacted by that by some of the prisoners being able to break out of the prison temporarily. The profile of that of the folk that made up that kibbutzim was indeed the profile of Israelis that are more peace-oriented, more peace-inclined toward the Palestinians, and policies that were more humane than what we've seen from the right wing. What was also telling, however, about the observations that, and I can't help but wonder. I mean, I've wondered this from day one. If there was a deliberate decision made by Israeli authorities for there to be a slow response to what was taking place, because these were more Palestinian-friendly Israelis that occupied that territory outside the wall. Allah knows best. But what we do know is that Clinton, when he said what he said, he again repeated the avalanche of lies that the American public and the world has been hearing for the past year, and that is that the Palestinian resistance fighters that came over that wall committed heinous crimes against innocent civilians, when in fact the overwhelming deaths that occurred because at the hands of the Israelis, that what they refer to as that Samson option. I mean, they killed the vast majority of their own, and that is a fact. And the
Look, I think that the International Criminal Court should investigate what took place. I think that there
They
were
have.
the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court indict or set out indictments against Benjamin Netanyahu for the genocidal campaign in Gaza, and they also indicted Hamas leaders. Now those Hamas leaders have since been killed or died in battles with the Israelis, and so I'm not sure exactly what will happen with regard to but I think it would have been important to see those facts come to life. So if indeed the United States and Israel had evidence to suggest that war crimes were committed, then I think that would have been a proper place to hash that out. So I've seen things that are, I think, concerning with regard to, what took place on October 7th. And I mean, and I don't have a problem, bringing that forward as a Palestinian. I mean, at the same time, there's clearly an enormous amount of lies and misinformation that have been coming out of the Israelis. We all remember the lie about babies being beheaded and all these nonsense
And that's what I'm talking about. That's
Absolutely,
been proven false. Yeah. I mean,
so these were all lies that were used to justify the genocidal activities that have been taken place since. But I think that ultimately the situation is such that we should have had a fact-finding situation take place, and unfortunately, that because of Israel's actions as it relates to the assassination of certain leaders, there is not that opportunity. So I think ultimately at this point we know that they don't want those facts to come to light. I think as it relates to the election, though, if we're only going to be talking about the presidential election, and we see how the Harris campaign is conducting itself, we really need to take a second look at that. And I know you had made those closing comments last week, and I felt like it was a bit premature to take the position that we're gonna we've been dealing with the lesser of the evil kind of arguments for a long time now, and that's gotten us nowhere. I mean, whether it's been, I think, a repeated argument that's been taking place, and I think the reality is what we need is to build Muslim power, and I think that's really where we're trying to move to. I mean, if we look at what we've been doing in Maryland, the Muslims came out, they voted uncommitted in the Democratic primary and voted en masse for Angela Alsobrooks. It's not because we're in love with Angela Alsobrooks. It's because, there's a strategy there. There is someone who we think can take a better position than David Troen would have taken. And she's definitely going to take a better position than pro-Israel extremist Larry Hogan will take. So in the down ballot races, I do think it's important for us to support folks who are at least open to communicating with us and talking about the facts. But at the same time, I think that at the presidential level, it's sort of beyond that, and unfortunately, as much as I wish we could have came together in sort of a coalition to support Kamala Harris against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is a clear and present danger. I could definitely, but so is Kamala Harris. I mean, you don't have to tell the Palestinians about that. You don't have to tell other communities about that. I think and when she's on a sort of campaign tour with Miss Cheney, and that could be her defense secretary or worse. I don't, I mean, let's not forget history. I mean, we remember the Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, George Bush administration, and what happened. I mean, we can't vote for this. We can't support these things. So I would just say that, look, I think we need to have our voice heard within the third party. I think Muslims need to vote in very, very big numbers. I think the Democrats need to take account for their actions and understand that they're going to have to earn our vote, and not take us for granted anymore.
Aki, I wanted your voice and the voices that your voice represents to be heard in this very important discussion that we're having, because it is extremely important for us to strive to the best of our ability to get it right. What is the argument that you make in light of the fact that there's no way for Jill Stein and Bush Ware, or my good friend who I would have voted for had Biden remained in the running, Dr. Cornel West, or any other independent. There's no way for them to win. That this election is going to come down between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Look, I think
argument. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. What I was going to say is I think we need to prioritize voting. We need to prioritize down ballot races. Leaders like, Angela Alsobrooks in Maryland have a direct impact on policies affecting our everyday lives. I think we need to impact Congress. I think that, we need to be a community that's committed to civil rights, committed to social justice, committed to uplifting folks. I think that the Muslims are, people of good faith who want to be good neighbors and good, have values in our civic engagement. And I think that we need to think about a long-term strategy. And the support for Jill Stein is, number one, to make sure that people vote in large numbers and are enthusiastic about voting for a candidate who aligns with our values and is against, funding genocide, is against engaging in more wars, is for protecting the environment, and that we're wanting to make sure that people come out and have a reason to vote. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in Maryland, for example, for a long time has been that we don't have anybody to vote for. I mean, people want to vote, but they look at the candidates, they look at the candidates that the Democratic Party has been, has put up, and they're unenthusiastic. I think Wes Moore was a better option for us. He really engaged the Muslim community, in his run for governor. The Republicans have been a disaster, I think, at every turn in Maryland. So, I mean, I'd love to see better Republicans as well. I mean, it's not just like, we want, only Democrats, but we haven't really seen that. So I think it's just at this point, making sure that we have a high voter turnout. That's why we care about, making sure that we vote for Jill Stein. And also that we, vote in down ballot races so that our voice is heard. But, I don't see any option with regard to voting for Kamala Harris.
Okay. And that's where you and I, unfortunately, we disagree, but we disagree as brothers. SubhanAllah, my own view has been and continues to be the person who is most responsible for what we're seeing today in Gaza and now in Lebanon as well is Joe Biden, the president of the United States. He is the commander in chief. He is the one that has the power to stop weapons from going. He is the one that has the power to demand a ceasefire. And if that ceasefire is not implemented, to impose consequences. Harris doesn't have that power as vice president. All she has is the power of the tongue. And yes, she should be strongly criticized for not exercising the power of the tongue. But she does not have the power to do what we would like to see done with regard to this this catastrophe that the world is witnessing. With that being said, we also know, Trump is a politician that has background. He has background, 4 years of background that we can measure. We know what he did. We know how the policies that he put in place, the decisions that he made, paved the way for what we're seeing today in occupied Palestine. It paved the way for it. We know, as you correctly noted, that he is a clear and present danger. We know he is a danger. So, I understand the wanting to give Jill Stein and or any other independent that is more representative of the values that we hold dear, as much support as we possibly can. But it's difficult. It's been very difficult for me to embrace the thought of punishing Harris at the expense of rewarding Donald Trump and seeing another 4 years of this man in the Oval Office, far more dangerous than he was those first 4 years. And now, what do you say to
that? Let me just chime in really quick. I think that your analysis fails in one major point. And it's that you are assuming that Harris wants to do the right thing. And there's zero evidence of that. She has gone out of her way to make sure that she is demonstrating a, unadulterated commitment to the pro-Israel agenda. She wants to continue to supply weapons to Israel. She wants to continue to support Israel. She wants to continue to defend Israel at every turn, despite its fascist, right-wing, genocidal government. So, it's like voting for somebody who is, in favor of apartheid in South Africa. I don't think that anyone should do that. And our friends in South Africa understand that very well. So I will not vote, just like I would not have voted for anybody who is pro-apartheid in South Africa. I'm not going to vote for anybody who's pro-genocide in Palestine. She's had ample opportunity to separate herself from the Biden administration. She's failed to do that. She's failed at every turn. She's palling around with Cheneys. She's sending war criminal and sexual predator Bill Clinton to lecture us on our religion. So I would say that she has not earned our vote. And just like we won't vote for apartheid, we won't vote for genocide, and we cannot compromise on this issue. Not this time.
Okay, my brother, I want to thank you for joining us today. We are just 2 days away from the final day of the election, of this election season. This is going to be one of the most consequential of your and my lifetime. And, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us.
Can I just say one last thing? I just want to say Jazakallah khairan to you and for, I know it's a difficult decision that folks are making. And one thing I want to just remind our, folks in the Muslim community and maybe the Palestinian and Arab community, the Desi community, everybody that's out there that in the pro-Palestinian camp and also African-American Muslims and others, we cannot be divided over this issue in terms of our way forward from here. Like in Maryland, for example, some of my very dear brothers have, said that they want to support Kamala Harris and folks, throughout the country. The Wharf Dean community, for example, these are our brothers and our sisters. We love them. We disagree with them, but we love them. And we hope that, and I hope that you'll change your position, but I still love you. So, and that's, I think important that everybody understand that we cannot get into this sort of Puritan, arguments about, who's more holy or who's more righteous, and we're not going to work with each other in the future and all that kind of things. So I would just say that, we need to, at the end of all this, the real work is going to start on Wednesday. And that's when we get busy and start worrying about 2026 and beyond.
All right, brother Sharif Silmi, thank you so much, brother, for ending on that very, very, very important note. May Allah bless the rest of your day. We're going to take a break now, a commercial break. And then on the other side, we're going to bring our sister on board for some more thought-provoking discussion on this topic for the day.
Join Hamza on his exclusive South African tour as he shares his personal experiences, never before seen footage, and powerful insights on the ongoing genocide in Gaza.
This house I'm standing on is completely destroyed.
This war should stop.
These 5 houses was full of civilians.
We are here in the middle of a Zahra neighborhood.
People gathering here, trying to help people.
The whole neighborhood is already destroyed.
This is more than just a talk. It's an invitation to witness Gaza through the lens of Hamza Saalakhan. Don't miss this opportunity to meet the photojournalist who brought Gaza's pain and perseverance to the world in its darkest moments.
Hamza Saalakhan, Rafah border, Gaza.
Follow Salam Media on social media pages for more on this tour and be part of the conversation.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Dad, these Frymax chips are so tasty.
Wow, that really takes me back. My dad bought me a Frymax chips every day after school. They were my favorite when I was your age as well. Quality is at the very heart of what we do, and that's why we ensure that every Frymax packet is filled with the beautiful goodness and flavor-packed taste that you've come to expect from us since 1982. Frymax, from generation to generation.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Welcome back. We are dealing with a subject for today that is a continuation of last week's. The dialogue, in fact, continues, and it revolves around, the question of what's at stake in the 2024 elections. Now, we had a second video that I wanted for us to see in today's broadcast, but Brother Sadiq, we're going to hold off on that video because I want to give as much time as possible to our sister to be able to share her views and to be able to respond to a couple of very important questions. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll save that video for another broadcast. Without any further ado, I want to bring on our sister who is a Democratic Party operative. She's been a delegate for a number of years. She is a very committed soul and brave soul. She was someone who was attacked. She was physically attacked at the convention that just took place in Chicago. And we're going to talk about that, where accountability for that is, along with some other important matters. One of them being her position on this race. Without any further ado, our sister, Professor Dr. Nadia B. Ahmed. Let's bring her on. Assalamu alaikum, sis.
Walaikum assalam, Brother Mauri. How are you?
I'm fine, alhamdulillah. How are you? That's the question. How are you doing? Especially as I understand from the last conversation we had, you are still kind of in a recovery mode from the attack that you sustained at the DNC convention. I'd like to know, first of all, how you're doing, how is your health, and also where are we on the accountability front for what happened to you and to others?
Well, I mean, it's a really difficult situation for me because it was something that I thought, okay, I got, I was attacked like physically after I was held up a Stop Arming Israel banner with two other delegates. and they specifically targeted me because I was wearing the only one wearing hijab, and so it was 3 men who hit me on the head with signs that say "We love Joe Biden," and they had wooden planks inside of them, and I since sustained a concussion from that, and I've been going to physical therapy for concussion. I've also gotten an MRI, a CAT scan, 2 EEGs, which both came back abnormal. So so I have to. My doctor told me I have to start taking anti-seizure medication just because they're not sure like what's causing these irregularities, like irregular brain waves after the concussion. And so it's like a longer path to recovery than I originally had thought about. And so it also has given me like a moment to kind of clarify and think through what we're doing in terms of our political organizing, and even for me personally. And I really think, like, as a community, we're still in very early stages of building political power and influence in this country. And it's a very difficult journey for many of us, and we faced a number of setbacks. But I think we've also seen and had a glimpse of what's possible in terms of what we can do with specific clarity and purpose. And I think we need to talk about the barriers that we have faced, but we can also talk about what we need to do to change that trajectory so that our voices are heard and are possible to shape the future.
I agree. Let's talk about the possibilities. Let's talk about where we are in terms of this election, where we may be on the day, the morning after. Let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on what's at stake and your position on this consequential election that faces this country of ours?
I mean, if I go back and think the organizing that I did for this 2024 election compared to what I did like GOTV in 2020, it was maybe like, I would say it was like 0.5% of what I did before. Like in terms of like 200 times less, I think. And really, I think we're still learning the rules of the game, but also we have to see how political messaging works in terms of the optics and strategy. And a lot of times what I've seen, and also what you've seen, is people just want to show up like once or twice or throw money at some issues. And I think that to really have like true political power and build leverage, we need to start thinking about having impact and where we do that. And for me, I think that puts me in a really difficult position in terms of working even within the Democratic Party in Florida, which in Florida has been the gateway to fascism, as I've seen firsthand. And it's just like really blows my mind. Even after they keep losing elections as Democrats, they really pat themselves on the back, saying that they're participating, that they're able to see measurable results, that they're building up political will and resilience, and that they need to hold their ground. And I think that that's something to teach us as well, is that even in defeat, they're like spinning it. And so I think if we want to build influence, we have to think not just about having a presence at the table, but also being able to shape that conversation also.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on what we saw in the Bill Clinton video? And not only the Bill Clinton video, but what played out at the DNC convention. You were there, and what also happened on the other side in terms of that conference that took place within the convention. And I forgot the name of the Arab brother who's been around for many, many years, who described that as being the most well-attended, the largest pro-Palestinian. he said that that was the largest, if I remember correctly, he said that was the largest conference within the DNC conference that he had ever attended, and clearly the most impactful, the most important, the largest for Palestinians. And so he was expressing optimism as opposed to pessimism, as vis-a-vis what took place and the turbulence that took place both for and against what you all were trying to bring to the main stage, which didn't happen. What are your thoughts on all of that?
I mean, I think one of the things we need to recognize is that there's a lot of undue influence, not just of APAC, but even within other sectors, like other industries. So you don't only have like special interest lobbyists like APAC, but you also have defense contractors, you have oil and gas lobbyists, you have banking influence, like you have a lot of like large lobbying interests. And so we are really thinking about, who are the peace and justice lobbyists that are going up against these defense contractors. And I think we need to see that there's like a clear conflict of interest, because one of the things that I've seen at the DNC in my time is that they're really focused on having control. And so that's why when Joe Biden had done an interview, he said very clearly when he was asked about uncommitted, he didn't see it as a threat, because it was a very controlled opposition to him that would step in line right away. And so I think that if we really are fighting for our values, we also need to think about who we're going to allow to define our agenda. And when somebody's been on the DNC for 30 years, it's not just about pushing forward an agenda, it's about making sure that they have self-preservation. And it's problematic when you have somebody who is not Muslim constantly being the voice of Muslims, as James Zogby has been. And I think that we also need to think about how Muslims have not served in the DNC over 4 years. Even when Keith Ellison was trying to run as DNC chair, he was basically shunned. And so I think we also need to think about how within our community, a lot of the organizing is also led primarily by Arab and South Asian men. And so we don't have a diversity of thought even within our own community. And so the majority of American Muslims are actually African American. And so their voices are often sidelined and underrepresented within mainstream Muslim organizing. And we also have to see that there's been calculated decisions made as well. And these are decisions that are made about us without our impact, the same way that you had the Abraham Accords made. And so back in the 60s and 70s, there was an influx of Muslim immigrants from foreign countries. And that was also, whether intentionally or not, diluted the organizing strength of African-American Muslims in the US who are already building coalitions. And so that also led to some of the fractures that we have to repair in our community that the last speaker, Brother Sharif, talked about. And I think one of the things we can see is, like, in terms of how we spin that, is that I don't think I would say like we've done a good job, give ourselves a pat on the back for what we've done. But I think we should also see what has worked both in terms of Black political organizing and environmental organizing, which have both shown that there's importance in building resilience and strategic planning as well as adaptability, and seeing that our voices are brought forward authentically. And that's what I think is really important for building lasting change, is that we don't just rely on a few big voices, but we build like this mass coalition of activists, scientists, and policymakers who are able to address these issues like the environmental and climate movement has done. And you also, if you look at Black political organizing in the US, there's a shared history of struggle as well as a commitment to justice. And so I think those are two areas where we can learn in terms of organizing, and also seeing about how we can't just be mere figureheads or placeholders in someone else's vision for what we want, but we have to be able to craft our own. And then one more comment I would make is about the DNC. There was, in 2016, there's close to 225 delegates that were pro-Palestinian and Muslim. And then in 2020, there was 175 to 200 Muslim delegates. And in the past 2024 delegation, there was probably around 60 or so Muslim delegates. So this was probably a regression in terms of Muslim participation, and also seeing like there was a growth in terms of Palestinian activism and advocacy, but in terms of having like actual number of votes and representation, there was a lower increase in that, and that's why I think there's a deliberate attempt to prevent us and keep us from having access to the system, and I think that's why it's more important than ever for us to fight against it.
It's a very good, very, very good point. Very good point. And I'm glad you picked up who it was I was referring to, John Zogby. Yes, a Palestinian Christian, I believe, but has been a long-standing member of the DNC, but he did make a point that I thought was a very, very important point in stating that the conference that was held there, and I remember watching it on television, that conference was the largest conference ever for the issue of Palestine, the Palestinian issue. And he chose to see that as the glass being half full as opposed to half empty, and being optimistic. Now, with the drop off of delegates that you just alluded to, we can see clearly that there's a tremendous amount of pushback taking place under the umbrella of the DNC that poses a tremendous an obstacle for those who are intent on building power, building force within under that umbrella. But I also, what also comes to mind for me on the optimism side is a point that the sister, the state representative out of Georgia, hijab wearing Ruel Roman made, and one of her short videos where she stated that it's a mistake to see the Democratic Party as one organic monopoly organization. She pointed out that there were thousands of organizations and a great many of them, and that number is growing, are pro-Palestinian, and that reminded me of a certain fact that I feel necessary to bring out whenever I am in a conversation with a brother or sister that gets into the rhetoric of there is no difference between the Democrats and Republicans. There's no difference between these two parties. The point being that if we were to take a tally, a poll of the if we were to take a poll of the hundreds of thousands of protesters that have taken to the streets in different parts of the U.S. over the past year for Palestine, if we were to take a poll, there is no doubt in my mind that the overwhelming majority of those polled would be Democrats, young and old Democrats, and not Republicans. And when I think about those who are present within the political system right now who have been calling for a ceasefire, I can think of a number of Democrats. I can't think of one Republican. And now, not to say there aren't any, but I cannot think of one Republican that has called for a ceasefire. But again, I can think of a number of Democrats who have. And so there is a difference. You know, these are two wings of the same bird. This is Brother Saalakhan speaking now, my assessment. Two wings of the same bird, but one wing is far more diseased and dangerous than the other wing. And so anyway, your thoughts, sister, on where we are right now. And I'd also like to get your thought on what Bill Clinton had to say in that piece of video.
I think one of the things to also note is like looking at the differences between the Green Party and also the Working Families Party. If you look at the Working Families Party has a ceasefire tracker that has close to 100 elected officials that are federal elected officials, both senators and U.S. representatives who are part of that, and they've supported and endorsed the ceasefire publicly. And at the state level, Representative Ruhr Rahman is one of those that the Working Families Party has endorsed. And so I think we really need to think about building power from the bottom up. It's really hard, even to get a third party candidate, really support the ideas that are brought forward by Dr. Jill Stein and Dr. Butch Ware. But for them to really get 5% of the vote, it really required organizing 18 months in advance. And it's really hard just to kind of scramble 6 months before an election, because real change is really a marathon and not just a sprint. And so we also have to plan and think about, what are we going to do? How are we gonna see things? What willingness are we going to do in terms of doing that hard and unglamorous work? And so I think that about 80% of Democrats are support a ceasefire, having an arms embargo. It also positively impact Harris in terms of swing voters or voters who are undecided if she would say clearly that she was supporting a ceasefire. Instead, when she was at the convention, she wanted to build the most lethal military force. And I think the people who are around her and advising her are very deliberate in terms of what they're saying and not saying. And I also would agree with Brother Sharif in the last segment that she hasn't really indicated that she's going to have a departure for Gaza policy. But I have seen, for example, looking at the issue of the Rohingya Muslims, as well as even Muslims in India and in the Uyghur Muslims, like I have seen her speak out on those issues. And so I think we have to think about how we're going to hold people accountable and how we're also going to advocate for ourselves in spaces that we're clearly not welcome. And the way that we have to do that is that we have to become agents of change instead of agents of empire. And that we have to stop being complicit in this system, and that we have to really try to dismantle these unjust systems.
Absolutely. What do you think I'm hoping that at least one of the independent runs, at least one will achieve that 5% threshold. Looking at, the way things have played out in the atmosphere that I've been exposed to, it appears that if one does, it will probably be Jill Stein if she's, her and Dr. Butch Ware. I'm hoping that at least one of them will. But as you pointed out correctly, there has to be work done after this election concludes, after this 2024 election concludes, because, no matter which way it goes, there's going to be some difficult days ahead. No matter which way it goes, there's going to be turbulence, no matter which way it goes, from my humble perspective. And like I said, there's going to be some very difficult days ahead. I am with you and with Brother Sharif on the importance of giving equal attention to the down ballot, so that if Trump wins, if he wins, we don't want him to have a Republican dominated Congress and, the majority of state legislatures throughout the country being Republican dominated, and on down the line. I mean, because that would just open the door to even more havoc. So, one of the points that I'm hoping, one of the arguments that I'm hoping folks who see this broadcast and others like it over the next 48 hours will take to heart is the importance of the down ballot, giving as much attention as possible to the down ballot, because if Trump takes the election and he gets another 4 years, it's not going to be, in my humble opinion, it will not be like the previous 4. I've heard some of our brothers say, I survived 4 years of Trump. I can survive another 4 years. Well, the next 4 years are not going to be anything like the first if he is reelected again. And so we've got some difficult days ahead either way. What are your thoughts on what can happen, or let me rephrase that, what should happen going forward after November 5th? What are your thoughts on what should immediately happen, especially among those who have been so, riled up, and justifiably so, over this election season? What should happen next?
I'm not even thinking about Tuesday. I'm thinking about 2 years, 4 years, 8 years down the line. And I think for us as a community, we really need to put some focus on a rescission of the Abraham Accords, because you have to see that there was no, what's the legal concept of free, prior, and informed consent, is that there was a Middle East peace agreement that did not include the major party, which was the Palestinians. And I think, we can also say, Trump, the Democrats, Harris, Biden, but I think we also need to examine the trends of Muslim leaders and organizations who have been endorsing and supporting normalization with Israel for quite some time within our community. And so, for example, you'll have organizations such as the Muslim Leadership Initiative, the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding, American Islamic Congress, Interfaith Youth Corps, Muslim Jewish Advocacy Council, Sister of Salam Shalom, the Muslim Women and Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council, and the Muslim World League, and a number of organizations which have very much focused on building ties with Israel and essentially sidestepping Palestinian rights. And so we need to see that this type of dialogue is not very valuable, and that we need to confront the power imbalances that exist in our community, and also show that not only do we need to hold our government accountable, but we also need to hold account for Muslim governments that are in a better position to be able to impact the change that they have, even, for example, in Turkey, the leaders can do a lot better job in terms of supporting an arms embargo. In 1973, OPEC issued an embargo. You would see people change their position very rapidly if that happened. These slow boycotts on McDonald's and Starbucks are making some ripples, but if you really just said, you know what, we're not allowing you on our air bases, you know what, you can't use our airspace, you're not welcome here, you're gonna see some people straighten out rather quickly. And so I think we also need to look inwardly and see how much we have allowed and not held accountability within our own.
I agree 100%. One of the nagging questions for me, especially over the past month, has been, why haven't we seen any demonstrations in front, Muslim organized and led demonstrations in front of these Arab Muslim embassies? Why haven't we seen them? Yes, they are in a position to be able to make a huge difference in what the world has been witnessing over the past year taking place against our brothers and sisters in occupied Palestine. And they have not. They've been going on as if, you know, nothing is going on right within their region. You know, their concerts, their great, out trying to out compete each other in sports activities and other frames of entertainment, wanting to rebrand, repackage what they have to offer the world in terms of entertainment, while a genocide is taking place in their own backyard. We should have had roving demonstrations in front of these embassies months ago. But anyway, so I agree. I mean, our brethren in that part of the world, they're in a much better position to have an impact, and they're not, and they should be held accountable for that. Any final thought, my sister? We're at the end of the broadcast. Any final thought you'd like to share with our viewing and listening audience on this topic for today?
I mean, vote. I mean, people died for the right to vote. My three of my grandparents are buried in Ocoee, Florida. In 1920, there was lynch mobs who attacked Black voters for just trying to go vote. And so I think that, we've grown and moved as a country, but we still have a long way to go.
Indeed, we do. Okay, on that note, we want to close out as we normally do, Surah Al-Asr, the words carrying even more weight than they normally do for those of us who often recite this short but very impactful surah of the Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalus salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.